The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
I'm Vinnie Politan, the subject of my investigation, the Idaho student murders. This is the biggest case that we are tracking. This case is about 4 awesome students who were taken from this earth by evil. That is the only way to describe what happened at the University of Idaho. Here's the story.
Ethan, Xana, Maddie and Kaylee were 4 friends living their best lives. All students at the University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, a place with a reputation as being incredibly safe. But in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, those 4 students were stabbed to death inside their off-campus residence. The brutal crime shook the community and touched the nation, setting off an intense manhunt for a killer. Investigators from the Moscow police joined forces with the Idaho State Police and the FBI, following every lead, every tip, and every piece of evidence. That investigation took them across the country to Pennsylvania and led them to this man, a grad student at a neighboring university in Pullman, Washington. This accused mass killer has denied the allegations and claims to have an alibi. In our investigation, we'll return to the scene of the crime. What does it look like now? We'll retrace the alleged route of the killer. How were investigators able to track him? We'll search for answers as we investigate the Idaho student murders.
So much of the coverage of this story has focused on that crime scene because of what happened there and what it was all about. It was about young people living their best lives inside this home together. Friends who were all doing the right thing and doing well in school, socially, academically, and setting themselves up for incredibly bright futures. But those futures were taken away. I want to show you a picture. This is from October of 2023. This was the scene. They had gone through, got all the evidence out, then they boarded it up and just wanted to keep people away from it. Such an important part of this case, this trial, and this investigation. But this was the last month or 2 months that this building was going to be in existence. There was this battle by the university to demolish that building, which brings me to my question that I want to investigate tonight, which is very, very simply, what does that crime scene look like now? We haven't been there in a while. So joining us live from Moscow, Idaho, Court TV producer Cody Thomas is with us. Cody, great to see you tonight. You're out there in Moscow. And that question from me is very simple. What does that crime scene look like now?
Well, Vinny, of course, one of the first things you notice when you come here now, you can kind of see behind me, the house is no longer here. I know my face is a little cut off right now, but it's no longer here. And like you mentioned, it was demolished. There was some emotion surrounding that demolition because some of the parents felt that it was a critical piece of evidence. The university officials felt like it was the first step of healing. But regardless of that, I did take a look around the perimeter, making sense of what's left here of the property and also making sense of what could have happened the night that Bryan Kohberger allegedly went inside that property. Take a look.
We are here at that King Road location where Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Kaylee Goncalves tragically lost their lives in November of 2022. And as you look behind me here, I'll step out of the frame a little bit, you can see that house is no longer here. They demolished it in December of 2023. There's still, though, memorials left out here, some stuffed animals, some flowers. Obviously, this community still really cares for these 4 young students. But regardless of this house being here now, we still want to give you a lay of the land of what is still here and what investigators have to go on as far as pinpointing where and how alleged suspect Bryan Kohberger got into the house in that early morning hour of November 13th, 2022. Of course, this is the space where the home would have been, in between these private residences and over to the left, these apartment buildings. Now, people who lived in this apartment building back then said it used to be pitch black all throughout this parking lot. As you can see, there's no street lights anywhere, but soon after those murders, this light bulb right here, people who lived at the residence say this light bulb was replaced to give it a little more illumination around this area. And of course, they still have it roped off. Not too long ago, all of this was sealed off by crime tape. And here's some of those memorials I was talking about. As you can see, flowers, stuffed animals. Put a little bit more in focus here, some candles. Looks like a framed picture right there. Obviously, these girls and Ethan were very much so cared for by the community. And you can see this fence going up the right of where the property would have been. Now, all of that is, of course, private property. We can't go up there. And likely that Bryan Kohberger could not have gone up there either if he did commit these crimes. But we want to take you up this hill right here to this back parking lot to where his car, that white Elantra that's reported on in the court documents, may have been parked that night. So as we stand here on this side hill, this side road that would have gone up the left side of that property, we can see that it's not really easily accessible by foot. I'll zoom in. Given the fact there's a pretty big drop-off right here, it looks to be maybe 3 or 4 feet. You know, you could easily hurt yourself and get injured if you're trying to come off of that. And there are also these rusted, looks as if to be what used to be fence posts. Maybe there used to be a fence here to kind of, you know, keep it separated from this building that is over here behind me. But again, you can see not that accessible, at least by foot, definitely not by car on this side. And also as we stand here, you can tell that it's not that busy of a road. There's not a single car that's come by for the minutes I've been here so far. But at one point in time when the house was here, outside of these trees, it did provide a pretty clear look into the side windows of some of those bedrooms of the house, and even a peek into the kitchen on the second floor where the crimes allegedly happened. Up here is the back parking lot to those apartments, and as I pan to the left, you can see that it also leads right to where the back of the King Road house where the victims lived at the time. Now, of course, the leaves are a little grown up now, but in November when it was a little cold, the leaves were off the trees, provided a clear view right into the back windows of some of those bedrooms and a super clear view of the kitchen, those glass sliding doors leading to the second floor that could have provided access inside the house. Remember that police reported there was no signs of forced entry into the home once they arrived. And they also believe that this back lot could have been where the alleged suspect Bryan Kohberger parked his car and scoped out the scene that night of November 12th into November 13th when the crimes happened. Again, this is the back lot right behind where that house used to sit.
And of course, Vinnie, as far as the prosecution and the defense in this case, they have made it clear that they got everything they needed evidence-wise from this house before it was taken down.
Yeah, I still believe it's a mistake. The people who need to go in that house are the people who are going to decide the case, the jury. Now they're going to get pictures, they may get some renderings, but they won't be able to actually walk through it to get a better idea. So I disagree with it, but, you know, they're the experts in Idaho. That's the way they do it. You know, when you went up to that top area, to me, it's always been about that area, because from there, there's the darkness, there's the cover. It's a lot that no one's really going to be going to necessarily, and it's a way to make your way to that house without drawing much attention.
That's exactly right. In fact, it was when you go up the side road to the left of where the property used to sit, there was kind of that drop-off that I talked about. But when you got to the back, it was a much easier slope. If someone were to try to sneak down there, you probably wouldn't break an ankle coming down. And, of course, it led right up to those back glass doors. So who knows? That could be a possible entry point where he could have been. have to wait till the details come out in trial, of course.
Right, and I think you were 100% on with the sliding doors. We know that they were dusting them for prints and the windows down there as well. But it's a safe place. Moscow was always a safe place. There was no reason that you would have to lock your doors in Moscow. But now, obviously, you do. All right, Cody.
And in fact, Vinny, there are some students out here. It was pretty bustling. You know, they're moving around. I'm sure it's August, so school's starting back. And like to your point, that it's pretty safe. They're out here throwing frisbee, playing intramural sports. So this is probably a one-off situation here in Moscow.
All right, Cody's going to stay with us. Coming up, how was the accused killer tracked from his apartment?
We're beginning that drive that Bryan Kohberger would have made that night of November 12th, going into the morning of November 13th on the way to Moscow, Idaho.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
Now, as I was making this drive out of Washington State's campus, I did want to stop and point out these cell phone towers. We know a crucial point in this investigation into police locking down Bryan Kohberger as a potential suspect were his cell phone pings in and around Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho. So these towers right here are more than likely some of the towers they caught some of his pings on as he left and returned to campus here on Washington State University's campus in Pullman, Washington.
One thing about the Idaho student killer, the accused killer, spent a lot of time driving around that area by himself in his car. In fact, I want you to take a look at this. He was stopped by police. This is beforehand for doing some improper driving. Take a listen.
Yeah, there was a little bit of confusion with speeding because someone had stopped. I wasn't sure what they were doing, and then they put on their light to turn. Mm-hmm. So I thought that maybe they were letting me go through. Oh. Did you see that?
No. Mm-mm.
I feel like right before I made the turn, there was someone who made a right. They didn't have their, their signal on, so I wasn't sure if they were just waiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would just advise just don't enter the intersection until you can go so you don't get stuck.
So him driving around by himself, and that is the theory that investigators and prosecutors have here, which brings me to the next question that I want to take a look at, which is how was Bryan Kohberger, the accused killer, tracked from his apartment? How did that go? Court TV producer Cody Thomas is still with us, and also joining us now, private investigator with over 20 years of experience, criminologist and profiler Jason Jensen. Cody, let me go to you first. You are there, and you were taking a ride, and you noticed some things. What did you find out today?
Well, Vinny, to directly answer that question about how it was tracked, we know it was a combination between those cell phone pings on the surrounding towers and surveillance footage of that white Elantra going to and from his apartment to the crime scene. But I took that drive from his apartment in Pullman here to the crime scene in Moscow, Idaho. Here's a look at what that would have looked like.
So right now, I'm on the Washington State University campus. More specifically, I'm at the complex where Bryan Kohberger lived right here behind me during the time of the Idaho student murders. Now, this is the location from where he drove to the King Road house in Moscow, Idaho, just a few minutes across the Idaho state line. I have the location queued up into GPS. I want to take you guys on the drive, what it would have looked like for Bryan Kohberger to take that night. The GPS says it's only about 18 minutes away, so not too far of a drive. And of course, right now, it's just after 8 o'clock here in Pullman, Washington, and we do know that Bryan Kohberger left this location around 2:53 a.m., so of course it would have been much darker, but at least while we still have a little bit of light outside, I want you guys to see what the drive would have looked like for him as we go from here to Idaho, the University of Idaho, to that King Road house location. So right now, we're going to take a little trip. We're beginning that drive that Bryan Kohberger would have made that night of November 12th, going into the morning of November 13th on the way to Moscow, Idaho. Again, we're here in Washington State's campus, leaving Bryan Kohberger's apartment complex. Now, one of the first things I am noticing is that I don't see, or at least readily see, any security cameras that are clearly in sight. But we do know that according to the probable cause affidavit, that at least 5 cameras on WSU's campus and around the campus caught Kohberger's white Elantra leaving around 2:53 a.m. and coming back after 5 a.m. Of course, we know those murders occurred somewhere in that window of time. Now, as I'm coming up to the exit point of campus, we see a lot of these light posts adjacent to the sidewalk here on my right. Now, what I have noticed is that every single one of those light posts that I've seen has a camera sitting right on top, a security camera. So any one of these, if this was one of the roads he took getting back on campus, could have been one of the cameras that picked him up in that white Elantra. As we've made our way off of campus out to one of the main roads nearby, you can see these huge, massive expanses of land on either side of the road. But what you don't see are streetlights or surveillance cameras out here. So I'd imagine after midnight, it's just after 8 o'clock here, but after midnight, I imagine it to be incredibly dark outside of headlights from your car or a few other cars passing by. And you see there's not too many of them right now, not that busy of a road. I can only imagine it to be less busy, again, after midnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., when he was allegedly out heading toward Moscow. So now we've made it to SR 270, State Road 270, the main road connecting Pullman to Moscow, Idaho. A little bit busier. You see traffic intersections, a lot more cars, a lot more businesses on either side. There's a sign, "Welcome to Moscow." And as I'm pulling into this intersection, I see several surveillance cameras. More than likely, some of which that picked his car up, that white Hyundai Elantra, the night of the murders. Here we are. We have reached the campus of the University of Idaho. There's the marquee right there out front. So now we are officially on campus, heading toward the King Road house, where the 4 victims lost their lives that night. There's a little lay of the land, some fields here on the right, looks like intramural fields. Some sort of barns of sorts, probably for the agriculture school up towards the right. As we're coming here, I see a few more cars, a little more busy around this area. A lot more street lights as well. They haven't quite turned on yet, but there are plenty of them out here. So I imagine it when it gets extremely dark that it's not, too dark. It's well lit once these street lights cut on. So now we've made our way through the depths of the University of Idaho campus. As you can see, there's a group of students right here in front of me. Very busy out here as school is preparing to start back. But right up here, as we make this left turn onto King Road, up here on the right, I'll slow it down just a little bit, is where the King Road house would have been. You can see it's blocked off right here. And this is the drive that Kohberger would have had to take that night to get to this location on November 13th, 2022. We have just wrapped up that drive from Kohberger's apartment in Pullman over here to the University of Idaho in Moscow to the King Road location. Of course, the house still would have been sitting there. The sun has set, and it is still to be determined as to what Bryan Kohberger allegedly did or where he went once he got here. But this is what that drive would have looked like for him leaving that night on November 13th of 2022.
Now, of course, Vinny, one thing I did note when I got on campus here in Moscow was that Sigma Chi house where Xana and Ethan were coming from the night of the murders, and it was only about 200 yards away from the King Road house.
Jason Jensen, unique way of tracking the accused killer in this case, a combination of cell phone and video, because that phone is off at some point. So that's how investigators have to piece all this together.
You're absolutely right, Vinny. They had to take a combination because the theory is, or the argument will be, that Bryan Kohberger turned off his cell phone in order to avoid detection and tracking. So, that's a sign of a sophisticated criminal in this type of a murder. So they had to piece together real-time video footage from surveillance cameras, which clearly indicated that the car was an Elantra, so there's no mistake. And then all the cell phone activity before and after the time of the crime really places Kohberger at different parts throughout southern Moscow, all the way back to Pullman, and before he left, like Cody had indicated. So it seems like a pretty buttoned-up case in my perspective.
Well, and a couple of things that make this very compelling is the way they're able to get and synchronize some of the video they have when the cell phone is actually on to establish that the phone is in that particular car. And that will be crucial, right? Because if you just have video, it could be anyone. And I think that's what the defense will be relying upon when this goes to trial.
Yes, and that's one of the things that we experienced throughout, the legal process, and you're familiar, Vinnie, as a former prosecutor. Defense attorneys like to take things, different pieces of evidence as a snapshot in time and argue against it, but it's the totality of all this evidence that will make or break the case against him.
And finally, Jason, they're going to claim that he is somewhere else. So to do that, they should have some way to prove that, either video or cell phone, just the same way that the prosecution is proving it here.
No, exactly. You would think that there would be a trail taking him from his apartment where Cody was at to the destination, the nature park where he supposedly was looking at the night sky. So we'll see, right?
Absolutely. Jason Jensen, thank you so much. Cody Thomas, great work on the ground in Moscow. I'm Vinnie Politan. We will keep looking for answers as the investigation continues.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
I'm Vinnie Politan. As we continue our investigation of the Idaho student murders, I think back to when this story first broke and the thoughts that went through my mind, which I think went through the minds of a lot of parents out there who have sent their children off to college. We worry, but we usually worry about things like grades, will they get homesick, will they make friends, are people being nice to them? Worries that they're real worries, but they're not worst case scenario. And that's what happened at Idaho for 4 families. Here's the story.
4 students were brutally murdered in their home near the University of Idaho. Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana taken away so young. And now their accused killer has been charged and is preparing for trial as prosecutors seek the death penalty. It is the case the nation is waiting to see and waiting for justice. But what about the victims' families? How are they dealing with our slow-moving system? We'll find out as Kaylee's mom joins us live as we continue to investigate the Idaho student murders.
Now, the families have shown incredible strength throughout all of this, but each family has their own journey that they're taking. And at one of the memorials that took place, we got to hear from the Goncalves family, Kaylee's family. I think it touched a lot of people. I wanted to show it to you one more time.
Maddie has truly been a blessing in our lives. Watching her grow and mature into the amazing woman she becomes is truly priceless in our hearts. She was the world to us.
Kaylee is a huge part of our family. The dynamics of our family will never be the same. We know that this is God's will. It's hard to accept. But she was a beautiful girl.
We're gonna miss her. We're gonna miss her more than anybody knows, and I know a lot of you people, the ones that know her, are gonna be right there with us. It's gonna be a tough road. That kid was, she shone light to the day.
The world is a darker place without them, but the light of their love and memories will always guide us all. Thank you all for joining us in this celebration of life of these beautiful souls. We love you, Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan.
It's amazingly tragic, obviously, but then the story and the case moves into our system of justice. And that brings me to our question, which is, it's a big one. What is justice here? What is justice for the families? Let me bring in our special guests, the mother and father of Kaylee Goncalves, Steve and Christy Goncalves are with us, as well as the attorney representing the family, Shannon Gray. Thank you all so much for being here. I know this is never easy, but I think the nation has seen the strength of your family, Christy and Steve. And as you sit here tonight, what is justice for you? What is justice?
That's a hard question that we've thought a lot about. Sometimes I feel that there is no justice. Nothing's going to bring the kids back. And therefore, the only thing that would be justice for me is for this person to be living in agony in the depths of hell.
I know that there's a lot of families who don't actually get somebody that is actually charged for it. So I do feel that we are lucky in that standpoint. And a lot of detectives and investigators put in a lot of hard work, and we're lucky to have that, and we want to be appreciative for that. It's a long, slow process, but we're willing and we're ready to do that. We're ready to put in the time and the effort and get through this, and just show people that this is the way that we can see justice in action, see the truth being taken in place, and then the right outcome, and society gets back to normal.
Shannon, this is a difficult journey, an absolutely difficult journey. That's why I'm so glad that you are there to help this family through this. What is your take so far on how our system of justice is doing in this case?
It's a tough question because, it's a small jurisdiction. I work in a much larger jurisdiction where things move a lot faster. You think things are going to move a certain way, and sometimes they don't. So it's been difficult for the family because a lot of times I'll say this is how A, B, and C should happen, and they don't happen that way. I have to explain why it didn't happen, and why it's taken so long, or it's taken longer than usual, or why the prosecution or the defense have done things that they've done. But I'm small compared to what Steve and Christy go through every day. I'm just thankful that they found me, that I can help them and answer any questions I can about them, and ease their minds when their minds need to be eased about the criminal justice process and what's going on. I mean, they're always going to be a part of my life, and I love them to death. So,
Christy, what are the plans for the trial when it happens?
Well, we'll know more at the end of this month when the change of venue is heard and is decided. We plan on being there. We want to be there. There's about 10 of us in the family that intend on being there for most of it. Obviously, there's going to be days that we will not be there intentionally for, but we're hoping that it stays in Latah County. So, that's a 2-hour drive for us. The further counties that they're looking at would make it hard. So we would have to relook at things. But we want to be there.
Steve,
we intend to be there.
Steve, as you have been on this journey now, it seems like forever, I'm sure, for you. Do you see any light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see that, hey, at some point, this page will turn?
I think of it as this is a living example of how we get things right again. Latah County did everything. The reason this is so slow and this process is taking so long is because they tried to do everything exactly by the book so that the community could see the justice, they could see it, and it wouldn't have to be taken, Idaho's a large state, it wouldn't have to be taken, 6-7 hours away. So I look at this as a living example of the way we correct things. When things go wrong, when things fall off the rails, like you said, you send your kids off to college, the last thing you should think of is anything other than your kid being a dumb kid and doing something embarrassing to get them on a camera or something that you're going to see at your employer the next day. That's like really bad. And for murder, for death, that's just not, that can't be new normal. That can't be something that we accept as a society. So I think we can be a living example for everyone, how we can course correct and figure this thing out and hold somebody accountable and, show that this is just a one-off that, won't happen and it's not the new norm.
Christy, are there moments where you can have happy memories? Are there moments where you can smile and think about Kaylee?
Oh, absolutely. You can't think about Kaylee and not smile, and we have so many happy memories and so many videos and so many pictures. And I look at them all the time. It's those late nights that get you, and you think of the tragedy that unfolded. And, it's terrorizing, it's traumatizing. But there are happy moments. There are.
Steve, if this gets the conclusion that we're all hoping for, which is the truth comes out and there's a conviction, are you prepared to make an impact statement?
Yeah, I just know my family. I know my kids. They're all strong. They're all intelligent, super smart. Every one of them has already wrote it out. They've already got set in stone. So yeah, we're willing to and just thank the community and thank all the people who've put their lives on pause so that we could have that moment, so we could have the justice, because it doesn't just happen by accident. And we've got people like Shannon in our life. It's amazing what we've been able to see, how people shown love to our family and reached out to us and flooded us with letters and different things. So yeah, I feel an obligation to all the people that have been with us this whole time. And that's why there's that sense of pressure that, this has got to turn out a certain way. And we're looking forward to seeing that turn out.
And Shannon, do you expect any problems with all the victims that want to speak, being able to speak, if and when we get to that part of this case?
Yeah, that was an odd occurrence that happened over in the Lori Vallow trial, where the judge was pretty, strict or adamant about following the statute when it came to who could speak and give victims impact statements. Most of the time, the immediate family and those things will be able to speak. The judge may put down, his foot when it comes to grandparents and other things that under the statute currently aren't maybe allowed unless they're serve as a representative for the family. But I'm hoping that the whole anybody gets to speak what they want to. There's a reasoning to it, but I don't see there being any problems in this case. So
that's good to hear. Shannon Gray, thank you so much. Christy and Steve Goncalves, our thoughts are with you, and that the nation's thoughts are with you, and our best to all of your family. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we've got more. Still to come. Was the killer posting online?
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
Yeah, the whole thing is really strange. I grew up in Moscow, and this sort of thing doesn't really happen that often in this area.
I think of North Idaho as a pretty off-the-map type of place, pretty safe place, very family-friendly, and to have 4 murders and then the guys just running around on the loose is a little unnerving.
Everyone's on edge, quiet and stuff. You don't see everyone as talkative, like chatty, as like social as they used to be and stuff. Want to go out. I got a text from my mom, and she said, "Hey, you're in Steptoe Apartments. Look outside your door." And I looked right outside, and I saw the crime tape, and I saw the unmarked police vehicles, people going in to do the crime scene search, and I was just flabbergasted that he lived right there.
There was so much talk and chatter in person and online when this was a manhunt, when no one was under arrest. And investigators were trying to figure out the case, and the public and the students and everyone was scared. Everyone had theories about what was going on here. And a lot of that was online as well. Now, there was a Facebook page called the University of Idaho Murders Case Discussion. And there was someone posting on there. I want you to take a look at some of these posts from someone going by the name Papa Roger. And these posts were very suspicious, very, very suspicious. And people were looking at them, and people started wondering, is this the killer? Which brings me to my next question, which is, was this killer posting online? Like posting online while the killer is at large? Let me bring in my guest to help answer this question. Clinical and forensic psychologist, researcher, and expert on violent crime, and author of the book, The New Evil, Dr. Gary Brucata is back with us. And also joining me, founder of Crime Scene Collective, Alina Smith. Alina, I want to begin with you. If you can give us a little background about this discussion page on Facebook, which I believe you used to run. What raised everyone's suspicion, and what was going on this page?
Hi, so yes, I used to be the admin for the page. I created it. And so we had this member named Papa Roger, and right from the start, he joined around November 29th, and then November 30th of 2022, he started to post, and he would just make a lot of comments and posts that made a lot of people uncomfortable. And he would make comments like, do you think the killer took something from the crime scene? Do you think that the killer showered there? How long do you think the murders took, like how long the length of the murders took place? And he said 15 minutes, which in the end we found out that in fact they did take about 15 minutes. He would post about the house, which nights the house had parties, and he was correct on all of that. He was correct on, I think he started to insinuate the weapon. He was correct on that. He was correct. I mean, he was not correct on the body placement, but when he did the map on those pictures that you showed, he was correct on some of those placements. There's just a lot of arguments that he would ensue with other members, and he was so strong-willed on how he was correct on
a lot of red
pretty
flags.
much every aspect.
A lot of red flags.
So many.
So Dr. Gary Brucata, I want to put up some of the posts for Dr. Gary Brucata. Here's one. Regardless of what has been released, I believe this is a sexually motivated crime. Another one. The killer has a sexual dysfunction. Thoughts? Let me go a couple more. I feel like blood ran down a few places, but it has been suppressed. The kitchen was dripping blood, but they won't admit it. And then the one that Alina referenced, they typically held Thursday night parties. Rarely did they have Saturday night parties. Dr. Gary Brucata, whether it's the man who's been accused or someone else, do you believe this could be the killer?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the type of offender we'd be dealing with if Kohberger is guilty is precisely the type that would feel a need to insinuate himself into things to assert a kind of power or control, even at that level. And so that kind of person who would view his crimes as a kind of output, a work of art in their own mind, would be very bothered by the idea of people getting details wrong, thinking they knew better than he did. And what you would see, I think, is someone who was sort of confused, because on the one hand, he saw himself as an expert on violent crime who was studying it to be on one side of the law, but then on the other hand might have actually been perpetrating it. So you see somebody who's a little confused. Am I here to try to solve it, or here to try to, boast about it? And so I think it's very possible. I've never quite made my mind up about what I feel about these particular posts, but I do think that somewhere this individual would have been insinuating himself on the internet in that period between the killings and the time of arrest.
Now, I want to put up that post, Alina, that you referenced. I know this won't be popular, but this is where I think the victims were found, and there's a map, and it looks like it's relatively accurate. What is the timeline of this and when he's actually caught?
So this was 8 days prior to when he was arrested.
8 days prior. And
right.
Does it appear to be relatively accurate here? Because this is information we didn't know, Alina, right?
Right. I mean, from what I understand, I don't think it was 100% accurate. It was close to being accurate, but I mean, we still don't know 100% where the bodies were found, and that still is. I think we'll find out when the trial. But you know, I mean, it gave us some inclination on, you know, he knew so much that it made a lot of, you know, speculation. A lot of people run wild with that and start thinking, oh, great, you know, well, he must know because he knew so many other things. But from the information we continue to get from this crime, I really don't think that was one thing he had correct, but he could have been throwing people off with that as well, because that was towards the final week where we're already.
And this is when they're closing in. Before we run out of time.
On him.
Yeah. Dr. Gary Brucato, if, and I'm saying if, this was the killer posting, do you think the killer wanted to get caught, or did the killer just want to try to get a little more notoriety out of this? If.
I think that this is the kind of person who was so egotistical that he forgot that he could get caught, and who could not help but boast and insinuate himself because at the end of the day, his ego almost certainly was the cause of this and the cause of his own downfall.
And as you've observed him, Dr. Gary Brucato, the way he comports himself, we have about 30 seconds here. What are your thoughts about the man who's been accused here?
I think this is a person who was very interpersonally peculiar and tried to deal with that by reducing everybody to a kind of science that he studied like microbes under a microscope. And that's why I think he was a watcher of people who tried to control everything and know everything about them and then finally possess them. And that's someone who did a lot of watching on the internet, everything that was going on.
Yeah, and watching on the internet and perhaps even participating on the internet. This is a story, obviously, that will continue. I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Gary Brucato. The New Evil is the book. We always appreciate your insight and expertise. And Alina Smith doing great work with the Crime Scene Collective. Thank you as well. Okay, folks, that's it. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep looking for answers as the investigation continues.
There you have it. If you want to see more in-depth reporting on the latest true crime stories, you can see me every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Thank you so much for downloading. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.